Hey, hey! Welcome to another episode of Digital Marketing Therapy. Today we are still talking about copywriting, and I'm so happy and excited to have Craig Alexander here to talk with you about really defining what you're best at so it can help you create a marketing strategy and a copywriting strategy that's going to help you connect better with your ideal audience, get more donations, and have better retention. Because really, that's what we want, right? When we bring the right people in to our organization through our messaging and through our emails and through our conversations, it means that we're going to have better retention and they're going to give over time more frequently. Craig Alexander is the president of Goomis, an award-winning full-service San Francisco advertising agency and the country's foremost authority on challenger brand marketing. His intimate understanding of what it takes to succeed with challenger brand marketing has made him an esteemed leader in his field. Craig always strives to create memorable, relevant, and motivating campaigns that are designed to evoke emotion or inspire people to take action. He has been praised by his clients for his expertise and passion for his work. And I love this conversation because we're really talking about aligning. What do you want to be famous for? How do you communicate? And what are your values so that everything comes together, the motivation comes together, and everybody makes that nice little marriage for long-term growth. It's just such a fun conversation and approach to copywriting. And you don't have to be a copywriter to take advantage of some of his tools. So if you're trying to do this with an internal team, you totally can. We also talk about a lot of ways to make sure the decisions and the choices that you're making in your copy are data-driven and coming from your end user donors, not coming from your own personal feelings about what your organization does and is best at. We've talked about this a lot on the podcast in the past, and it's no different here. We need to make it about our audience and not about us. So Craig is really going to help us walk through some ways to make that happen. But before we get into it, this episode is brought to you by our VIP days. So head on over to thefirstclick.net/VIP. If you need a content review, a website review, if you need some support in building these ideal donors and figuring out how you can talk better to your ideal audience, that's what these VIP days are for. We can help you craft language. We can help you craft stories. We can help you really build the audience that you need to talk to and help you figure out where they are and how to speak to them where they are. So again, thefirstclick.net/VIP to check out those options so we can get your content and email marketing strategies rocking and rolling for you. Let's get into the episode. You're listening to the Digital Marketing Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Sammy Bedell-Mulhern. Each month, we dive deep into a digital marketing or fundraising strategy that you can implement in your organization. Each week, you'll hear from guest experts, nonprofits, and myself on best practices, tips, and resources to help you raise more money online and reach your organizational goals. Hey, everybody, please join me in welcoming Craig Alexander to the show today. Craig, thanks so much for being here.
Hi, Sammy. So pleased to be here and part of your great podcast.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm so excited you're here to talk during our month on copywriting. But before we kind of jump into what we're going to talk about today, clarity and messaging is something that's so important to you. Why is that something that you're passionate about and something you really like to share to help businesses be more impactful?
Yeah, that's a great setup. I think that from a challenger brand marketing point of view, which is what my company specializes in as an advertising agency, everything starts with the words. And then everything comes after that. So the last thing you want to do is start drawing pictures until you know what those pictures are trying to say. So our perspective is understand what it is that your audience, could be your community, your constituents, your customers, whatever they might be, that they understand exactly what it is that you need to say to them that's going to drive them to action, and say it as efficiently and meaningfully and emotionally as possible.
Would you define to you what a challenger brand is?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And of course, so challenger brands, they come in all shapes and sizes. They are industry agnostic, for profit, not for profit. And it's really a situation with any marketer who finds himself in complex marketplaces where there are competitors with greater resources. And resources can be defined lots of ways, although most typically greater resources means more money. So you have more money to spend behind traditional advertising, branding, distribution, sales, all the things that you would normally throw a budget against. But those resources can also reflect things like awareness and attitude and equity and history and reputation. All of those things fall into a resource that what we refer to as industry gorillas have. And the challenger brand is going up against those industry gorillas with fewer of those resources and needs to understand what it is that's going to make a difference to their audience, their community, without having to spend dollar for dollar with the industry gorillas.
Well, I think where that starts, because this is speaking directly to our listeners, like they're, smaller organizations with limited resources of all of the things that you talked about, trying to make the biggest impact they can. And I think a common misstep that a lot of businesses and nonprofits make is trying to do too much too fast. So how should we think about, I think one of the things we talked about before this was, what do you want to be famous for? Like, how important is that in kind of setting the framework for how we step into some of the ways that we speak to our audience?
Yeah, and it's a good setup because there's two things there. One is focus, right? What's that? The first thing you need to do, trying not to do too much too fast or expand too quickly, is to take those baby steps. And challenger brands need to find that playing field where they can win. We use an analogy that I think might help your listeners, and it's our pen on the table story. So I'll take a pencil, and I'm holding up a pencil if you can't see me, and the way we operate is that if we threw our pencil on the floor, wherever you might be, that pencil, our brand, is competing against everything in the room. Right. So it's competing against chairs and desks and walls and ceilings and wall hangings and books. It's got a lot to take on. But if you take that pencil and you put it on your desk, now you're only competing with everything on your desk, right? Your notebooks, your other pencils, your printer, maybe your screen, your microphone. But if I take that pencil off the desk and I put it on a notebook, now my brand is only competing with everything on that notebook. And that's where challenger brands need to spend their time, is on the notebook. And once you win on the notebook, then we can go back to the desk and then to the floor and then into the hallway and then take on the world in general. So focus is a good part of that. And challenger brands need to remember that, play where you can be successful. And you raised a question too, Sammy, about, being famous and what we're being famous for. And challenger brands absolutely understand that they have to find the one thing that they're going to be famous for, exploit it, and make sure they communicate that, articulate it to their audience. Now, how do you find out what that one thing is, right? Your marketplace will tell you.
Yeah.
You can't tell the marketplace what you want to be famous for. The marketplace is going to tell you this is what makes you fantastic. And we'd want to spend time understanding that from the marketplace through a little more formalized research, but we can talk about that when we get to it.
Well, I think that's really hard for organizations, especially nonprofits, because you're so I should say just any startup or nonprofit, because you're so passionate about what it is that you do. You may have started your organization for a reason, and then the marketplace attaches to something a little bit different, still adjacent, but not the exact reason that you had as your vision for the organization. And I think also a lot of organizations are probably saying right now, well, we do lots of things. Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not so much about your messaging and your what are we famous for, what you're communicating doesn't mean that you aren't doing other things. It just means that you are really focusing on this is how we're going to connect with our audience and really build and grow and scale so that we can talk about some of these other things that we do.
Absolutely true. And it does go back to the pencil on the floor, because if you put your pencil on the floor, you're talking about all the things that we're great at. But the pencil on the notebook is the one thing that we're spectacular at. It's the one thing that differentiates us from our competitors, that sets us apart, distinguishes us in the marketplace, and will ultimately make us famous, whatever that might be. It might be our customer service. It might be our singular product line. It might be like UPS, our color. I mean, some things you're famous for simply because you described it earlier. The marketplace identifies you for something, and that's what made you famous.
So how do we know what the marketplace is telling us?
Yeah, so we need to talk to them. And so the way that we would work as a supporter to a marketer, or whatever it might be, an agency is really what we are. We would want to structure a research project where we would talk to users, constituents. And in the nonprofit world, we want to talk to donors, supporters, followers. We would work together with the client, with the marketer, with the nonprofit, to identify that list of people who love you. Because what we want to do is be able to understand what it is about you that those constituents love, recreate it, and put it in front of other potential followers, supporters, donors, so that they'll feel the same way and do that. So we will want to conduct interviews with those supporters. And we actually do old school telephone interviews. It's important that we have a phone conversation with somebody, because we don't want that face-to-face, eye-to-eye contact, even in an environment like we're sitting in right now, Sammy. I can look you in the eye and I can ask you a question, and you're going to tell me pretty much what you want to. What I'm going to want to hear. So I smile and we have a nice relationship. But on the phone, you don't have to worry about that. I really just want to ask a question, let you think about it, and share with me the emotional response that you have without concern to how it's going to make me feel. So old school 20-minute phone conversation. We'll ask a series of questions that get that follower thinking differently about the nonprofit that they support. And they will talk in very emotional terms, because we won't ask yes, no, closed-ended questions. Everything's going to be open-ended, imagine a world questions that gets them thinking about, yeah, these are the things that really get my heart fluttering about this nonprofit, because that's where we're going to extract the language, the messaging, the positioning, those copywritten words that we're going to put back into the marketplace to capture other like type supporters.
Well, and if you're working with a limited budget and you can't bring in an agency, like, do you have any tips for people on, because hopefully if you're in the fundraising space, you're having one-on-one conversations with people all the time. I think sometimes we just tend to not listen to the things that we should be listening to. Like, we're focusing on, am I going to get the money, this, that, and the other, as opposed to hearing, like what you said, the emotional pieces that are coming to us. So do you have any, tips for ways that we can kind of prep our teams for when they're going out and having these one-on-one conversations, how they can come back and kind of digest and unload that information to either your marketing department or whomever's helping you with that, to also use that information as you move forward?
Yeah, I think collecting data is always going to be important. Any decision made that's data-driven is a decision that's got a better chance of being successful. Avoiding the idea that this is what I think my support base loves about us or wants to hear from us is risky business, right? We call that guest marketing. We don't want to deal with guest marketing, right? You're going to be in trouble. We want to be able to understand what it is, and most importantly, why they have attached themselves to the organization. So when members of an organization are out in their community having one-on-ones, we want to gather that data in a more structured way so it can be aggregated and combined to confirm consistency of response and ensure that we know what we're hearing. So now, from a cost standpoint, and there are organizations that for whatever reason can't bring on a structured agency like ours, and I will also say with a comma here that We work in nonprofit all day, every day. There is not a time when our agency isn't working with a nonprofit. We're based in the San Francisco Bay Area, so we've got our connections are large and consistent in terms of supporting nonprofits, and later we can talk about some of those specifically. But if you don't have the budget to manage that, there are lots of tools available that can do the work for you, right? Lots of survey type applications that you can create and submit to your user base, your support base, and just get back that sort of two-dimensional response, which is not as advisable because you really are lacking the emotion that you're hearing in a conversation, unlike just simply asking somebody to fill out a survey and answer questions or fill in the blanks. Those tend to be a little bit less useful. However, for the money, you can't beat it because you can essentially do it for free and collect some information that'll lead you to where you're going. However, nothing beats the human to human connection.
Well, it's better to do something than nothing.
No doubt. Totally agree.
It's like good, better, best, right? Like we want to get out there and do something, but like, let's always continue to strive to do something better so you can get better data to make better decisions.
The last thing you want to be doing is making large scale decisions, at least from a marketing standpoint, based on what you think to be true,
or what a board member thinks, or
even worse, right? The focus group of one, that one board member that seems to be the loudest in the room. That person tends to influence everybody else.
Nope. Yes, 100%. Okay, so once we start to get this message, I know a common pitfall that organizations have is that they tend to talk solely about themselves or talk about, this is what we're doing, this is who we are. And what you've given an organization with all this data and information is a way to really speak to the motivations and ideas of the ideal donor, right? To make them feel like they're part of your community, that you understand them, you get them. So how do we start to kind of think about our copy and take this information and maybe kind of rewrite, readdress, or kind of refocus the way that we're putting things out there?
Yeah, it's a mindset, Sammy. It is a matter of knowing that whatever you're going to say needs to connect with that community in a way that drives them to action. And action is driven through emotion, and the emotion is based on impact. So if you think as a marketer, right, a nonprofit marketer, the first thing you need, whatever you're saying, it has to be impact driven or results driven, or in traditional business, it's benefits driven. Right? Lots of companies like to spend time and money marketing the features of their organization. Isn't this great about us? But if a customer, or in our case with nonprofits, a potential constituent says, "So what?" then our message is not clear. We have to be able to answer that question. So what? So the person that's seeing our message leaves that with the idea of, this is exactly what I've been looking for. Where have they been all my life? This answers the question, what's in it for me? So mindset is, think about language that speaks to impact and what's in it for that potential user, supporter, donor, follower, constituent.
Yep. And I think, you could also then use these statements and things that you learn if you're speaking to the motivations, like an impact. A lot of times we have levels of saying, okay, well, at this dollar amount, the impact is this. At this dollar amount, the impact is this, right? So by gathering all this information and looking at your copy, like that's a great place to match up those motivations of what you heard from donors versus what you think the motivation should be for why they would want to give.
Yeah, absolutely true. As an example, one of our clients is the San Francisco Giants baseball club, the Giants Community Fund. And they have their own established 501c3 independently operated philanthropy based in San Francisco, built to support 30,000 kids around Northern California, Southern Oregon, Nevada. And impact is at the core of everything that I'm on the board of directors as well as being a client. So it's an important connection to me personally. So everything we say needs to be impact based. This weekend coming up in San Francisco is our annual glove drive. And so what used to be, hey, everybody come to the ballpark, see the Giants and bring in your old beat up glove and we'll donate it to a kid who doesn't have one, has evolved into here's $20, we'll buy you a new glove kind of a thing. So it's a fundraiser, still a glove drive, but the impact is $20 gets you one glove. A kid gets a free, beautiful new glove, and the impact of a new glove to a kid is hard to measure. But $200 is a whole team's worth of gloves, and $500 sets up a league, and all those sorts of things that you can apply to direct impact. So I think that might be an example of language that would connect with the community.
I love that. And I love that reframe because, it's a fun event. People are going to want to come, but that's how you increase the dollars that are coming into your organization, because you're really saying, okay, well, yeah, I have capacity to give $200. I was only going to give 50, but I have capacity to give 200. And if it's going to, hit that, and this is the event that I'm at, like, that's super awesome. Like, that feels good. Like, that makes me feel much better about what I'm doing. So if we think about our organization, now we have like better language that we know speaks to our audience, but we also have our values as an organization for how we want to show up, whatever that might be. So have you ever found, like, in cases where it's hard sometimes, or to kind of marry how you talk about, like, these are the values and this is the motivations? Like, if the priority of I guess I'm not saying this in a very eloquent way, but if the priority of our values for our organization and the priority of the motivations for how our donors are giving don't fully align, how do we kind of navigate through our messaging, or should we even care as long as there is some sort of cohesion there? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. And I think we should always care.
Yeah.
And I think there's a matter of priority that connecting with the emotional level of the constituent is more important than ensuring that your values align with what they're trying to achieve. I think a good example, we'll stay with the Giants Community Fund for a second. The glove drive can touch a nerve on anybody and just feel like, yeah, I can, here's $20, a great glove. But what you don't know is all the things behind that's beyond just the glove drive and goes into scholarship programs and anti-bullying and a whole world. You can't tell that story at any given moment. So you start thinking about priorities. And a lot of times that's how you build your websites, right? So when you think about nonprofits who tell their story on a website, we like to think that you have 7 seconds to tell your story. 7 seconds to tell your story. That's, maybe that's devolved over the years, but 7 seconds to say who you are, what you do, and what you stand for, right? You have 7 seconds to make that statement in the first page that you land on a website. So if after that 7 seconds, you haven't convinced that visitor that, yeah, this is the place for me, the impact that they offer connects with me on an emotional level, then I'm clicking out and I'm moving on to the next thing. In that 7 seconds, though, you are able to capture that emotion and connect with that visitor. Then they click on whatever that next step click is. Learn more. Here are our values. And that's when you start telling your story 7 seconds at a time. The first 7 seconds being that's the instinct of get you in their door. This is where you're going to first make a connection. But then each step down the way is the next level of priorities, right? You go from values to history to leadership to where to donate, to become a volunteer, to all the other 7 seconds of layers down below that gives you a chance to spend some time with them. Website's going to help you do that. Yeah,
so good. And I think that's such a great way to rationalize and think about how we move people through the journey to become, what is the goal of the piece of content that we're doing, the event that we're doing, right? Like your event with the Giants is like that is a very particular purpose. We don't need to try to muddy the waters with everything else. Like our follow-up and how we communicate with them afterward is how we can kind of share more of those messages. So I think that's really smart. But I want to touch on something because the people that we lose, I think we tend to want to then like vomit information because we don't want to lose anybody. So we want to give them everything so that we don't lose them in that 7 seconds, because once they bounce, we've lost them. But I think the power in what you're saying is that it's okay to lose those people because they're not the right people. So could you talk a little bit about like how we should just really feel comfortable with what we're doing and how we're talking to our ideal customer and not worry so much about all the other pieces of furniture in the room?
Well, that's it, right? That's our pencil on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Let's keep that pencil on our notebook where we can control our audience. And if the people aren't connecting with us in our first 7 seconds, then they may not be the people who are going to be with us not only 7 seconds, but 7 years down the road, right? We want constituents that are passionate about supporting our mission right now, tomorrow, and 7 years from now. And I think by thinking about who's going to be on that notebook and not just everybody in the room speaks to targeting and addressing your message to those right people and attracting them in. Because to your point, Sammy, if somebody that's just in the room happens to click on the website and they're fleetingly interested in your message, but it may or may not make sense. If they don't click, they don't click. Mm-hmm. They're not for us anyway.
So how do we know when it's time to move from the notebook to the desk?
Yeah. So I think that's the whole idea of expansion. And when is this organization able to still live up to its mission, whatever those values, those core beliefs are, to be able to still live up to that while serving more people, whatever that might be. I'll stay with the one example that we have, the Giants Community Fund. It's a 30-year-old organization that began in 1993, talking to 50 people in downtown San Francisco, right? So now we're 30,000 people throughout a larger footprint. But the only way that organization expands successfully is through the ability to raise enough money to deliver the services on the same consistent high quality level and be able to deliver the impact for 50 people as it does for 30,000 people. If there is a time when some people aren't benefiting from the impact of our efforts, then we have to cut back and make sure that we're still able to manage the community that we're serving. So I think, to your direct question, I think we start moving from the notebook to the floor when we're able to serve more people at the same level we're serving the fewer people.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about consistency. I mean, we talk about this in marketing all the time. You don't need to be on all platforms all the time. Pick one that you can be really consistent with, get it going, do it well, make sure it's working, and then expand, right? Because that quality, I think we're both talking about, that quality and that consistency is critical to sustainability, and then take the next step, and then take the next step. Like, we have to kind of squelch, because especially as entrepreneurs and founders, that patience is the hardest part of growth in an organization.
Yeah, no doubt. And you said something else I thought was interesting, just a little side note, of that consistent quality is critical, and it'll build an organization. And just as quickly, consistent lack of quality will destroy it.
Yeah.
And it won't take long. In fact, it takes a lot longer to build up through consistent quality than it is to destroy through a lack of quality. Yep. So something to keep in mind.
I think that's extremely true. Any other kind of copywriting tips that you might want to share as people have gathered all of this information and they're ready to make some changes, or they're, ready to start writing different words on the website, kind of what other tips do you have for people that are like, well, I'm not a copywriter, how they can kind of approach that?
Yeah. And a lot of things that we touched on. So remember, you have a limited amount of time. So say the most important stuff up front.
Yeah. Don't
beat around the bush and build a case.
You don't have to be too cutesy.
Say that again, Sammy.
You don't have to be too cutesy.
Oh yeah, don't. Right? You have to be emotionally connective. So you've got, we said 7 seconds, longer format, right? If you're going to create something, the most copywriting you should ever write is 30 seconds, 45 words. If you're writing more than 45 words at any point on your website, on your collateral materials, your brochure, you need to rethink it because you are absolutely saying more than you need to say. So that's the longest format. So the positioning language, which we talked about earlier, is 7 seconds. 30 seconds that's max. Remember that you're speaking to a constituent, a prospective constituent who needs to hear from you on an emotional, impactful level. So those first things that they see on the website need to connect with them in terms of impact, that their support does this. We have a good friend of ours. His name is Stephen Wessner, and he created a theory of website creation called the XYZ theory from a messaging standpoint. And the XYZ theory says, we do X for Y so you can Z, which is to say, we do X. What do we do? And again, this is like the first time you get to the website, we do X. This is in that 7 seconds, right? What it is you do for Y, for me, I'm the visitor. It's clear that this is from, I'm the audience that belongs here. So you can Z. So what do I get out of that relationship? What's the impact? We do X for Y so you can Z. That's the copywriting tip that we can give you that's going to help you get what you need out of those first 7 seconds. And then the rest of it just becomes gravy.
We do something similar. What is the problem you solve? How do you solve that problem? And why are you the one that should be solving that problem? So same, right? It's the same thing, right? Similar format. And I think instead, most organizations start out at the top saying like, talking about themselves and the amazing thing that they're doing and what they need from you, as opposed to this is the problem we solve from the standpoint of your motivations for why you would want to give.
Yeah. Or worse, Sammy, starting with your history.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. You're going to lose more audience that way, saying that we were founded in 1967 in a
nobody cares,
backyard of a hovel in wherever, downtown, wherever. You've already lost everybody. So yeah, I think we're on board.
I think the hardest thing about copywriting and marketing in general is dropping the ego, and also understanding that everybody has multiple decisions. What you do is not unique, right? And so what you have to do is communicate better why you are the right fit for someone, as opposed to communicate better about why you're amazing. Because there could be 5 other organizations in the Bay Area that are providing sports equipment to kiddos. Now, granted, the Giants have name recognition. I mean, that's not necessarily a fair assumption, but that doesn't, so, all those other organizations would be your challenger brands like you've been sharing about. And everybody has a message and a story to tell. So how can you connect then to your local community better than what the Giants do? Like you can. It's not an uphill, it's an uphill battle, but it's not impossible.
I think you said it all, Sammy. All I'm going to do is pull out some of the words that you said, and really the one word is why.
Yeah.
I think to articulate why, what that differentiates you from the 20 organizations in your community that are doing the same thing for the same constituents. Mm-hmm. Your why is different than anyone else's, and that why has to connect with the marketplace, with the community. Connect those dots. Mm-hmm. You got it.
Yep. Okay. Well, I know you have a great book that's out if people want to learn more about the Challenger brand. And I know you have a lot of other resources that you can share with folks. So if people want to connect with you, Craig, how do they do that?
Okay. So I'm showing my book.
Yeah. So head on over to YouTube if you're not watching the video version.
Yes. Let me do it. It's called Challenger Brand Marketing. John Gumas and I wrote this book as a follow-up to Marketing Smart. But really, Challenger Brand Marketing is everything we spent the last half an hour plus talking about. And that book's available on Amazon. It's available at gumas.com, which is the agency that John and I work at. And it's GUMAS.com. Everything you need is there. It talks all about Challenger Brand Marketing. You'll see it in the first 7 seconds. That's what's going to connect with you. So, yeah, and the book I think I also told Sammy that Challenge Brand Marketing was a #1 bestseller. that's exciting and a first time for me. I'm a first time author, so I'm kind of floating on all of this.
As you should. Gotta
So
celebrate
thanks.
those
Yeah.
wins. Yeah.
And if anybody wants to reach out to me directly, please don't hesitate. My email address is the letter C, Alexander at gumas.com. So reach
I
out.
love that. Yeah, and we will link all of that up in the show notes at thefirstclick.net/222. I hope 2 is your lucky number because that is the episode that this is. Craig, any last words to leave with our listeners?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I wanted to tie it all together was for everybody to know that what you think is less important than what your constituents think. So base your decisions on what's most important to the visitor, the listener, the potential supporter, donor. Think in their terms, and you'll be fine.
That's awesome and easy to do. It doesn't take it just takes a mindset, but it doesn't take tech or money or anything to do that. So I love that. Well, Craig, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Such a treat, Sammy. Thanks for inviting me in. It was great.
Thank you so much again, Craig, for joining me on today's episode. So many things and so many great reminders. Again, everything will be linked up in the show notes at thefirstclick.net/222. And if you want to see his book, it'll all be linked up there as well, so you can check it out. Remember to subscribe wherever you listen so you don't miss out on a single episode. Don't forget, we have bonus episodes that have been launching as well. And the only way to know that they happen is to make sure that you're subscribed wherever you listen. Or if you want to check out the video versions, we're here on YouTube as well at Digital Marketing Therapy. I am so grateful for you for listening to this episode, and I will see you in the next one.